Today we're going to be talking about alternatives, one of the most important aspects of thinking, but also one of the most difficult, because it's really quite unnatural for the mind to look for alternatives. Normally the mind wants to look for certainty, this is it, security, certainty, not go chasing after alternatives. But we're going to look for alternatives today. I'm going to make a drawing here, and it's not a drawing of anything particular, it's just a drawing of a something. There's no one right answer. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you to give me suggestions as to what you think that could represent. There's no one right answer. Let's have some suggestions what you think that might represent. Fellow over there?
2 donuts on sticks.
2 donuts on sticks. Anyone else around this area?
Someone frying 2 fried eggs.
Someone frying 2 fried eggs.
2 hats on a hat stand.
2 hats on a hat stand.
2 Mexicans fishing.
2 Mexicans fishing. There's another version, 2 Mexicans doing something against the wall.
Polo plantation.
A polo plantation. That's a very good one. A polo mint plantation. Very nice one. All right, little fellow in front.
2 rings being thrown at pegs at a hoopla stall.
That's a nice one. 2 rings being thrown at pegs at a hoopla stall. The girl right behind.
Eyes on stalks.
Eyes on stalks. Very nice. Yes?
And 2 targets.
2 archery targets. Yes, that's a nice one. Also sometimes said to be targets for cross-eyed gentlemen, because you look at this one and shoot this one. All right, any others? Go here.
Skateboard upside down.
Skateboard upside down. Again, that sometimes leads to an interesting one where people say it's a dead roller skate on its back with its feet in the air. All right, well, looking for alternatives there is easy and it's fun. There's no one right answer. We can move off in many directions. And sometimes looking for alternatives is quite easy. And the next exercise is alternative ways of doing things, which is also quite easy. What we've got now, 2 boards over there. If you'd like to bring those forward, Dinah. 2 boards and 2 pieces of string. And the idea is to cross the floor of the room in front of me, using the boards and the string in such a way that your feet, hands, clothes, or anything else doesn't touch the floor. And I'm going to ask for a volunteer first. I'm going to ask the gentleman, the little lad, immediately in front of me. Now, I want you to try that out. How would you use those boards to cross the room in such a way that your feet, hands, clothes don't touch the floor? Okay. Let's see, you go ahead. Okay, keep going, you're doing all right. Keep going, keep going. Okay, that's an approach, it's a good approach. Okay, fine, just sit down again. Okay, Dinah, let's see your approach. That's one way of doing it, certainly a perfectly feasible way of doing it. Another way might have been to stand on one board, place the other board in front of you, pick that up, stand on that, pick that up, using them as stepping stones. That might have been another way. And now we're going to look at a further way, I hope. Okay, that's enough, Dinah. Let's get a volunteer to do that one too. Okay, why don't you try again? Stand on it, hold it up, and hop across. Just a few paces. One hold it up quite taut under your feet. Okay, jump. Good, okay, fine. Sit down. So there we see that there was a perfectly adequate way of doing it, as the young fellow did, a perfectly adequate way, and then we look for a better way of doing it. So in the first exercise on alternative, we were just free-ranging, finding alternatives. Here it was a matter of saying, we have a good way of doing it, but let's look a little further and see if there's a better way, which is much, much more difficult, because we're very rarely forced to look for that alternative. Now, the exercise I've got here is a somewhat similar one. And I've got a heavy ball, a steel ball. It's pretty heavy. And I'm going to roll it across here. And I just want you to think to yourselves for a few moments what sort of barrier you might put up here which would stop it going forward. Just the characteristics of a barrier you might put up here which would stop it going forward. Just think to yourselves for a moment. I won't ask you, I'll just go through it. But just think what characteristics the barrier might have to stop the ball going forward. Well, what usually happens with this, I'll just go through some of them. What usually happens, people say, well, the barrier should perhaps be rather heavy, a book or something, so the weight will stop the ball. Or they say if it's not heavy, then perhaps it ought to be strong and stuck to the surface, so again it stops the ball. Or indeed, you might say, let's have a bit of double-sided sticky tape, so the ball will gradually slow down. All these are perfectly correct, useful ways of doing it. But if we got trapped by it and said the barrier must either be heavy or fixed to the surface, we would be leaving out a whole range of alternatives, including the one I have here, which I hope works, which is so light that you can blow it away, and yet which acts as a reasonable barrier, I hope. And what it is just a folded piece of card or postcard, and I'll draw how it's folded. It's folded like this. And as the ball rolls onto it, the ball rolling there pins it to the surface and forms a strong barrier at the end. Now, it's no better than any of the others, but it certainly is different from the others. And the point I want to get across here is that very often we have an adequate way of doing things, like these are adequate ways, but we need to make an effort to look for alternative ways which may be better. And in the next problem, that leads to a solution where the ordinary way may or may not. And this one, again, I want you to think about quite quickly. And I'm going to put these discs up here. And what the discs will form is a triangle. And that triangle is obviously pointing upwards. And the task is to get the triangle pointing downwards, moving the least number of discs. Just think of it for a moment or two. Moving the least number of discs, get it pointing downwards. Well, this is a case where it really depends on the way you look at it. And we find an alternative way of looking at it. And if instead of looking at it as a triangle, we look at it as a rosette with 3 points, then it's very easy. We just move the points round to the next position. And you get it pointing downwards. So that's a case of an alternative way of looking at something which allows us to move forward. So in all this, we're dealing with alternatives. Alternative ways of doing things, alternative ways of looking at things, and so on. Now, the next one I want to show you is a game which I invented some years ago, and it was invented after a conversation with a famous mathematician at Cambridge, Professor Littlewood, and we were discussing chess, and we agreed that chess was difficult because it was complex and had so many pieces. So as a challenge, I decided to invent a game that was as simple as possible, and this was the result. And in this game, each player has only one L piece, which you can move to any new position you like in your turn. That's the opening position. After you've moved, you may, if you wish, move one of the red pieces, which don't belong to anyone. Now, supposing you were blue, I want you to tell me how many different positions for your L piece can you think of in that opening move. Let's have some suggestions. Just think for a moment. How many different ways could you place the L piece? It's enough if only one of the little squares is different. Let's have some suggestions. The different ways, yes?
5.
5. Let's see. There's 1 there. There's 2. There's 3. There's 4. Which was the 5th one? Which one have I left out? That one.
Yeah.
That one. Any advance on 5? Anyone?
Well, have you used the one where it goes across the top, then down? Is the other side?
Come and do it. Just place it as you think I ought to have placed it. That one. Could be. I thought I did, but anyway. Okay, maybe. Okay, so in that case, there's a fixed number of alternatives. You can't go on imagining more and more. There's a certain number, and you find them or you don't find them. Now, what about the next situation, which is somewhat in between?